Today we will discuss about the spiritual racialism of Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner was an Austrian occultist who sought to explore the spiritual nature of humankind by trying to understand the origin of human races. Through studying the cosmic laws that influence individuals' hereditary constitution and the origin of racial differences. Steiner's racial doctrines are structurally inherent to a worldview based on belief in reincarnation, karma, and spiritual entities. It all starts from a basic observation. The natural form of plants, animals, and humans is not a matter of coincidence. Behind the physical world, biology, genetics, and chemical interactions lies a supersensible world. An extra-dimensional reality far more expansive than mere clumps of matter colliding without reason. The universe vibrates, and we vibrate with it. When a soul incarnates, its vibrations gradually densify, moving from an immaterial state to a material one. The soul then takes on a form and is endowed with a biological shell. Believing that this biological shell, which forms the body, arose purely from random genetic circumstances is, in fact, quite naive from a materialistic perspective. In reality, the entire energetic content of a soul is imprinted into human physiology. The biology of living beings is merely a reflection of their inner vibrations. Humans have unconsciously retained this knowledge by relying on a person's appearance before interacting with them. The more luminous a soul, the more it manifests in a radiant body. Conversely, the darker a soul, the more it manifests in a darker body. Within the different racial groups that represent various stages of the evolution of consciousness, there are souls that are ascending and others that are descending. According to Rudolf Steiner, if originally all humans were Atlanteans, the majority of humanity has slowly degenerated, creating new decadent races. Many human souls have become lost in matter, accumulating bad karma through their actions and thus failing to follow the spiritual evolution that was initially intended. Over time, humanity has divided and hierarchicalized itself. Those beings who evolve the most toward the light form the most advanced race, which embodies beauty, creation, intelligence, empathy, wisdom, and kindness. They constitute the Aryan family, with the most elevated being the white individuals with celestial eyes and solar hair, the Nordic blondes. They embody the biological forms that come closest to positive frequencies. As one moves away from them, beings incarnate in darker and less civilized racial groups, which have either remained stationary or degenerated. Thus, according to Steiner, Asians, Easterners, and black individuals represent spiritual and racial forms that are lagging behind in cosmic evolution. The most degenerated human beings have even fallen out of the human realm to descend into the animal kingdom. They are the ones who make up the current monkeys. During prosperous times for spiritual life, the lower racial groups empty of their souls and tend to disappear. In contrast, during periods of decadence, the lower races spread. According to Steiner, many ancient souls that were once at the top of the hierarchy have developed bad karma due to their misdeeds such as greed, theft, lying, or hatred, and now find themselves reincarnating into lower groups. The non-white peoples of the modern world are degenerated descendants of the Atlantean populations, who have failed to progress toward the white race, which is the most capable of progressing spiritually. In our time, the physical nature of things can be deceptive, in the sense that it is possible for a man of good race to commit bad actions in his life. But as previously mentioned, This will then result in him reincarnating into a darker body in his next life. Thus, the race of a human being corresponds to the vibrational level of their soul, but it does not strictly define their actions and the expression of their free will. According to Steiner's theory of cosmic evolution, the existence of racial diversity is a deviation from the proper path of spiritual and physical development for humanity. The simultaneous existence of different racial groups is the result of the untimely interference of demonic forces, which have disturbed the course of evolution ordained by creation, meant to produce a succession of unique races rather than a coexistence of multiple races. The fact that there are radically different racial groups on Earth demonstrates that there are radically different souls. This process proves that the living beings of this world still have a long way to go if they wish to progress into a new dimension. As long as there are these racial differences, peoples will be in struggle and chaos will reign on Earth. Had this evolutionary trajectory been fulfilled, it would have led to the emergence of a universal human. Steiner's racial theory focuses on a process of individual development through a series of incarnations in progressively superior racial form. We must acquire new abilities through repeated incarnations in successive races, a process governed by karma. The pinnacle of this process of spiritual selection has been described by a disciple of Steiner as cosmic eugenics. Thus, we see that an individual is not condemned to live only in a primitive race while another exists at the most developed stages of racial existence. Each of us is responsible for our racial level. Its main characteristics form a racial hierarchy of superior and inferior groups, a contrast between progressing races and declining races, with the crucial notion that individual souls are responsible for their own racial and spiritual progress or degeneration. Physical aspects reflect the spiritual realities of race because our spiritual nature expresses itself physically through our race. Moreover, the emphasis on racial difference as a corollary of spiritual progress led Steiner to vehemently denigrate egalitarianism and anti-racism. The most characteristic sign of our time is the belief that when a group of individuals has developed an ideology, such as the union of all men without distinction of race, nation or color, etc., something has been created or accomplished. Nothing has been done except to throw sand in people's eyes. An achievement is only reached when we observe the differences between things and realize what their conditions are. These themes recur throughout Steiner's works. The variety and physical diversity within the human species are imbued with powerful esoteric significance under the banner of progressive evolution. Such considerations provide an essential key to the anthroposophical understanding of history. From antiquity until the early 19th century, many souls incarnated in the peoples of Europe because they were luminous. This is why European demographics dominated the world. Today, the trends have radically reversed. Inferior racial groups are exploding demographically due to the arrival of very low souls. Steiner proposed a series of concrete assessments of racial groups. He taught, for example, that black individuals are marked by a powerful instinctive life, Asians and brown individuals by a powerful emotional life, and whites by a highly developed intellectual life. These differences are visible to a clairvoyant who observes the aura of human beings. Africans were described as very physical creatures, spiritually immature, and devoid of connection to higher spiritual realms. He taught that black individuals completely cut themselves off from the spiritual world. According to Steiner, the youngest souls, in any case the majority, incarnate in colored races. So it is the colored races, particularly black, that primarily bring the youngest souls to incarnation. Unlike spiritually mature Europeans, black individuals are essentially determined by characteristics of childhood. In 1923, for example, he lamented the frightful cultural brutality that was the transplantation of blacks to Europe, which sets back the French people as a race. He made other ethnic assessments that were sometimes very specific. Jews and Chinese, for instance, served as examples of racial stagnation. Steiner described indigenous peoples as decadent, stunted, and degenerated. During a lecture given in March 1923 in Dornach on the different racial groups of the planet, Steiner provided precise instructions on races. Quote, "When asked which race belongs to which part of the earth, one must say, the yellow race, the Mongols, belongs to Asia. The white or Caucasian race belongs to Europe, and the black race belongs to Africa. The black race does not belong to Europe, and the fact that this race plays such an important role in Europe today is a tragedy." In a 1923 lecture on the color and races of humanity, Steiner stated, "One can understand history and all social life, including today's social life, only if one pays attention to the racial characteristics of people. And one cannot understand everything that is spiritual in the correct sense of the term unless one first examines how this spiritual element acts in people. Precisely through the color of their skin. According to the occultist, the purpose of the whites is to civilize the earth and lead to the disappearance of the lower groups. The destiny of the Germanic peoples is to integrate the spiritual and the physical in order to embody the transmission of spiritual impulses on a physical level and within the human body. Steiner proclaimed that the new dawn of the white race would come if the white race chose spirituality over materialism. In 1923, he stated, I quote, "The white race is the race of the future, the spiritually creative race. These profound spiritual and racial differences would ultimately lead to a violent battle between white humanity and colored humanity, to a divergence of humanity into two races, one of good and one of evil, which would be physiologically distinct. As stated earlier, Rudolf Steiner's racial concept is not based on rigidity but on the fact that biology changes as souls change." Here is a long quote from Steiner. "Races succeed races, civilizations succeed civilizations. The soul that normally fulfills its earthly mission incarnates in a race. It acquires its qualities, making the effort so that it can incarnate the next time in a more evolved race. Only those souls that become bogged down in their race, that make no effort to rise above physical materiality, are held back, in a sense, by their own weight. They reincarnate a second time, possibly a third time, in a similar race. Such souls exert a retarding influence on the body of the race. Races would not fall into decadence, nor would they extinguish if there were not souls that cannot or do not want to progress toward a more evolved race. Look at the races that have been preserved since ancient times. If they are still here, it is simply because there were souls within them that could not rise any higher. As with all things, races appeared one day and will disappear one day. Those who place their persistence as a dogma would do well to soften their notions. One must come to terms with the relativity of concepts to soften and vivify them. It is necessary to renounce the rigidity of dogma, because if times change, our concepts must change as well. Otherwise, our ideas will lag behind the times. Steiner means that races are means, steps to be taken but not the ultimate goal of existence. The aim of human beings, ultimately, is to transcend biology and leave the Earth to incarnate in other worlds. This will only be possible when the inferior groups have disappeared and only a race of light remains, white and victorious.